Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our vegetable garden in Spokane, Washington, where the hardiness zone ranges from 5B to 6A. And happy September! I can't believe we're already this far into the growing season with fall just about being here. Yikes! But I'm very excited about today's video because it is my September vegetable garden tour. And if you've been following me for a while, you know I do this once a month to show you what's going on in the garden and show you some goofs on my part, some triumphs, how plants are growing, my impressions of certain types of vegetable varieties that I'm growing for the first time, and so on. So the thing about September is that the garden is in major production right now. So I'm going to take you bed by bed through the garden, show you what's going on, and I hope you'll be impressed. As you can see, we are very into gardening in raised beds. The majority of our beds are 3 feet wide by 8 feet long by 10 inches tall, and we use a drip irrigation system to water everything. In this first bed, I'm growing 4 varieties of carrots: Dulciva, Narvik, Tender Sweet, and Purple Sun. Let's see how some of the varieties are coming along. Oh, that's impressive. So that one is a Narvik. Looks pretty darn good. And then I'm curious about the purple one because I have not been harvesting any yet. Wow. That will look much prettier when I wash it off. Very nice. Now I told you that I made a couple of goofs this year, and this bed is one of them. Darn it. So initially in the spring I planted beet seeds as well as some different types of greens. And beets are susceptible to leaf miners. So I was real good about putting hoops over this bed and floating row cover to keep the adult fly away from the plants. So far so good, right? Well, what I didn't take into account is that the different types of greens that I planted were going to be done much sooner than the beets would be. And we wanted to do a succession crop in this bed once we had finished with the greens of corn. Well, you can't cover corn for very long because eventually it will need pollination. So I decided to just cross my fingers. We took the cover off, cleared up the bed, planted some corn, and the corn did great. You'll notice it's gone because we finished harvesting it. But the problem is, once that cover came off, the leaf miners came and just absolutely ruined the leaves. The roots are fine, so that's good. But let me show you a close-up of what leaf miner damage looks like in the leaves so you can recognize it in your garden. And the moral of the story is I should have planted those beets where I could keep the bed covered for the entire season, at least until I harvested the beets. So this is what leaf miner damage looks like, and it's on almost all of the leaves. The leaves that have little rough edges probably were pecked at by quail, so they don't have anything to do with the leaf miners. But if you see little sort of trails through the leaves, that is leaf miners at work. I know it looks like the leaves got burned, but nope, it's leaf miner activity. This bed used to have our green arrow shelling peas in it. And once it was finished, basically when the weather warmed up, it was time to switch to something else. And we decided to grow a bed of bush beans, and all of the beans that we harvest from it will go to the food bank. And I have another bean bed near it that I'll show you when we go down the next row. But the plants are doing very nicely, they're blooming, and they should be forming pods any day now. I'm a little embarrassed to show you this next bed, and that's because it has been so hot here lately that I haven't really wanted to plant anything in it yet because I was worried anything would bolt to seed. So what's left in here is some parsley, some cilantro, and And of course, that's where I had all of the Bauer lettuce plants growing, and they definitely bolted to seed when we started getting into the 90s like this. But in the interest of being forthcoming with you, here's the bed. It needs some serious weeding, hoping to plant some more lettuce seedlings in here in a couple of weeks. Fortunately, this next bed is doing great. This is where I'm growing Swiss chard in this half and beets over here. And what I have been doing, and it looks like it's time again, is I have been harvesting the leaves from the Swiss chard, and what I do is I steam them and freeze them for use sometime over the next few months. And then with the beets, I also do occasionally harvest some of the leaves because beet leaves are delicious, and so I do a similar routine with them. But the beet bulbs are growing really great, and I'm looking forward to harvesting them. Since they're under this cover, I don't have any problems with leaf miners in the bed. I'm really pleased with this bed of gray zucchini. And you might think, oh, everybody's tired of zucchini by this time of year. Well, no, actually, this was a succession crop bed, and the plan is to donate all of the squash from it to our food bank. And so I've been making twice weekly stops at the food bank with all sorts of produce from our garden. So that's really cool. But you can see here that it's a more pale type of a squash. It's absolutely fantastic, and it has been so productive. I'm being really good about harvesting them while they're at a nice small size like this, rather than the whoppers that can happen if you leave them alone in the garden too long. Okay, I told you I have made two major goofs in the garden this year. First was the beets, the second is the cauliflower patch. So I have not grown cauliflower in years, and I just never had good success with it. But this year I thought, you know, I'm going to give it a try again. And so I planted, I think, about 6 or 7 plants in this bed. Again, they're 3 feet by 8 feet beds. And I put tall hoops over it with some agricultural insect netting to keep cabbage butterflies and moths away from the plants, so we wouldn't have any problems with those pesky caterpillars. And I guess I learned 2 main lessons from this. First of all, the cauliflower plants are huge, and I did not remember that would happen. So I planted way too much in this bed. It should have been probably 3, maybe 4 plants down the center of the bed instead of in a zigzag pattern, which is what I normally do. The second thing I realized was that this bed just doesn't get enough sun for the plants to grow well. So this is definitely a crop failure. I do have a couple teensy sprouts of cauliflower from a head that bolted to seed, but you know, I'm just so discouraged with it, and it really was a mistake on my part. Darn it. Okay, now we're starting up on the second row of raised beds, and I promise things get better from here on out. First thing I wanted to point out is the row of 6 large containers that Bill is growing hot peppers in. And let me show you a close-up of one of the plants, because they might look a little bit spindly, and you'll notice Bill's got some sticks in there to hold them upright. But wait till you see how many peppers are on an individual plant. It's crazy. Well, this might look like a spindly plant. Do you see the number of peppers on here? Wow, that is crazy. And I don't remember the variety, so I'll ask Bill and I'll put the name on the screen for you. But holy cow. And there's 6 pots. You'll notice the bed right next to the peppers is currently empty, but that had a succession crop of corn in it. And again, we recently harvested all of the ears. The plants were very productive for us, which is great. In this next bed, I've got 2 kinds of tomatoes growing. There's a single plant of Chef's Choice Orange, which is my all-time favorite slicing tomato, and you can spy a little bit of orange color in here. The rest of the tomatoes are Blue Beach paste tomatoes, which are great for making tomato sauce, salsa, ketchup, and so on. And I want to point out something that I did yesterday that you might want to do with your own tomatoes. Yesterday I took a pair of pruners and I cut back the plants by about 2 feet. And I know that sounds drastic, but I want the existing tomatoes on the plant to be ripe before our first frost. Ooh, I said that word, frost. I don't know when it's going to be exactly, but hopefully not for a few weeks. And I want everything to ripen. And by cutting the plants back, it's forcing them to focus their energy on ripening the existing tomatoes rather than producing flowers and more leaves and more branches and so on. So if you haven't done this yet and you're in a fairly short season like I am, I would recommend doing that as soon as you can. I mentioned earlier how we planted 2 beds of bush beans for the sole purpose of donating the harvest to our local food bank. Well, this is the other bed, and as you can see, it is way ahead of the first one that I showed you. So this bed has red swan bush beans. I've never grown this variety before. It came from kitchen garden seeds, and I thought it would be great fun to try it. So let me show you how beautiful the beans are. So look at these pods, aren't they pretty? The pods just grow to about 5 inches long, so I definitely need to harvest again. I've already donated 1 batch of beans. I'm hoping folks are liking them. Next up is what I would call a bill bed. This is where he's growing both some sweet peppers and hot peppers. And they are just so prolific, it's amazing. You also might notice there's a big plant of parsley on the left end of the bed. But everything is growing really well, and you can see they've needed some support because those peppers are heavy. I also wanted to point out on the back of the pepper bed that Bill is growing some red and yellow onions. And we've just about harvested them all out of there, but that has been a nice companion plant for the peppers. Now, even though I'm primarily growing zucchinis in this next bed, I just thought you would enjoy seeing Mr. Majestic marigolds, which I'm growing in a corner of the bed. Aren't those cool? The first type of summer squash that I'm growing is called Zephyr. You can see they're yellow with green tips. I am crazy about this variety. It's my first year of growing it. I'm very happy with it. And boy, are they productive. The other squash I'm growing in the bed is Cocozelle zucchini. And you know, I had totally forgotten how large the plants get. And of course, they decided they wanted to grow in the pathway instead of on top of the bed. But these ones are super productive. And I think what I'm going to do next year is I'll grow 1 Cocozelle and 1 Zephyr, and that should be plenty. Although it is fun to donate to the food bank, I have to admit. This next bed is a bill bed. And the plant that's growing in the front is a Cape gooseberry. He had heard that the little fruits, which develop in pods like ground cherries, are super sweet, and he thought it'd be fun to try them. I don't know if he knew they were going to get quite so big. And then in the back here is Pandarino grape tomatoes. That is his go-to tomato for making fresh salsa. Okay, we're finally at the end of the second row, and what I'm growing here is Torch Tithonia, or Mexican sunflower. Ordinarily, the plants should be quite a bit taller, although they're certainly healthy, but this is in a row with where the cauliflower plants are, and this area does not get quite as much sunshine as these types of plants would like. Okay, we're finally in the third row of raised beds, and as you can see, Bill has more peppers growing in even larger pots. Most of them are hot peppers, and they are doing amazingly well. This is our famous pole bean arbor, and in it I'm growing Vortex and yellow Monte Gusto pole beans. All of the plants are doing great, and boy have they been productive for us, which is awesome. If you have never seen this bean arbor before, it's made up of 4 individual trellises, and it works so great because the beans grow up and over the trellises, and it creates a shady area for me to pick from on the hottest summer days. I also wanted to point out that on the south side of the bean arbor, we're growing some basil. This one here is lettuce leaf basil, and then you'll see some down there with a darker stem, and those are Thai basil. And if you're curious what these yellow flowers are, that is big duck yellow marigolds. And in addition to providing some nice color in the garden, I have found that marigolds are great at repelling certain types of pests. On the north side of the pole bean arbor, you can see we have more marigolds and also some onions. Anytime we have a little extra space, we always try to tuck in additional crops or flowers or something to really get a lot out of our garden. Here's the broccoli bed, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that Belstar is my favorite variety, and I see that it's time to harvest a few more side shoots. The bed is covered with agricultural insect netting to keep those pesky cabbage moths and butterflies away from the plants so that we're not dealing with caterpillars. Now you can see how the plants are doing. It's always important to keep an eye on your broccoli plants and harvest them regularly because they will continue to produce for you. This is our winter squash arbor, and I also use it for growing cucumbers. Now, for some reason, the vines aren't growing very high. Usually they grow up towards the top. But I think part of the problem is that it's just been so hot and there haven't been a lot of vines for me to train up the arbor. But let me show you how things are growing. Now, all of these vines here are lunchbox cucumbers, and they have been going absolutely nuts. Of course, I just harvested them all, so I don't really have any to show you out here in the garden. Now, while we're on the subject of cucumbers, do you know my tried and true method for keeping the cucumbers that you pick as fresh as the day you brought them in from the garden? Because let's face it, they deteriorate as soon as they're off the vine. So all you have to do is take each cucumber, wrap it in a dry paper towel, or you can use some type of cloth towel, and you can put as many as you want into a plastic bag and then into the vegetable keeper in your refrigerator. You will be amazed at how long they stay fresh for you. Now, if you peek through here, you can see one of my autumn frost winter squash. I'm not growing quite as many as I did last year, but we love this variety. It is so delicious when you roast it in the oven. I'm also growing Burpee's Butterbush Butternut Squash, and they are coming along very nicely. This is a great shorter season butternut squash, and you can see by the wilting it's getting mighty hot out here. Well, I don't even want to go inside our little hoop house, but I do want to show you what's growing in the two beds and how they're coming along. And then I promise we just have one more bed to cover. In the bed on the left, I'm growing Tuscan Napoli cantaloupe. I've got about 8 melons in here. Some of them are very close to being ripe, and I want to show you what to look for just in case you're new to growing cantaloupes this year. So this one is a perfect example because I think it's going to be the first to ripen. Now, if you notice the little melon next to it, see how green it is. And look how green these stripes are. And then look at this one. You'll notice the skin has turned sort of a honey orange color, and these are fading away from green and also turning sort of an orangey color. That's one thing to look for. The next is the stem where it attaches to the vine. And unfortunately for this example, it's on the back side of the melon. But when you see that the stem is separating from the melon, that is definitely a dead giveaway that it's ripe. And then last but not least, if you see yellow jackets buzzing about. They can smell the sweetness of the flesh inside, and so they're also a sign that a melon is ripe. And let me just add that if you have never grown your own melons, I encourage you to do so, because they are so incredibly flavorful, and I cannot wait to start harvesting them. In the other hoop house bed, I'm growing Supremo paste tomatoes. We use them for making salsa, sauce, and ketchup. And we just did a huge canning job a couple of days ago, so I'll have to show you a picture of how many tomatoes were on here when we were starting to pick them. But this is now my go-to variety for paste tomatoes. They are determinates, so they don't grow very tall. They don't take up very much room. They do not get blossom end rot. I have had no problems whatsoever with this variety, so that's what I'm going to grow next year and from there on out. Okay, this is the last bed I wanted to show you. This bed is part of 4 beds that we built quite a few years ago to the south side of our garden. And for a few years, plants did amazingly well, and we thought, boy, this is great having these extra beds. Well, we have trees that are growing to the south of these beds, and they discovered, oh, here's a great water source. Let's put our roots into the beds. And what's happening is that the trees are growing great at the expense of what we've planted in our beds. So this might be the very last year that we use these south beds. But what I have growing are some zinnias, because you can never have too many flowers. I've got New England pie pumpkin. I'll show you that in just a moment. I've got some mini pumpkins that I'm growing that will be for autumn decor. And I've also got sunflowers. I love sunflowers, and they seem to do well. So I've been trying to convince Bill that maybe we should grow this entire bed full of sunflowers for next year. Here's one of my New England pie pumpkins, and as you can see, the vines look just pathetic. So they're obviously not getting what they need out of the soil in the beds, and it's really frustrating. Here's some of my mini pumpkins. So that's cool. But again, you can see that things are just not growing well, which, oh, I get so discouraged when that happens, but lesson learned. And here are some of the sunflowers. The bees certainly appreciate them. Well, it is way too hot, so it's time for me to head indoors. Thanks so much for watching the garden tour today, folks. Happy gardening.